The final battle for Earth lasted 18 hours and changed the fundamental nature of warfare in the galaxy forever. Human forces that had evolved beyond their original species fought with a coordination and brutality that shocked even the Keth Mori, who had designed them. Every ship, every weapon, every tactical decision was made by beings who had become the perfect fusion of intelligence and killing instinct. Captain Collins commanded the space battle from a hybrid craft that responded to his thoughts as if it were part of his own body. Around him, human pilots who had merged with their ships hunted swarm vessels through the orbital space above Earth. Each kill made them more effective as they learned and adapted faster than their enemies could compensate. Target the command vessels, he ordered through a communication system that transmitted directly from his enhanced nervous system to every human ship in the fleet. Cut off their coordination and the rest will fall apart. The response was immediate and devastating. Hundreds of human ships moved in perfect synchronization to engage the largest swarm vessels that served as fleet commanders. Weapons that had been designed by human scientists working with capabilities they had never possessed before tore through alien defenses that had protected the swarm for millions of years. On the surface of Earth, the battle was even more intense. Alex coordinated ground forces from the Amazon base while Lisa managed global communications and resource allocation. But they were no longer entirely the people who had discovered the tiny house in the jungle. The genetic modifications activated by extreme combat stress had changed them into something that retained human intelligence and emotion, but possessed capabilities that no natural human could achieve. Swarm ground forces are breaking in every theater, Lisa reported as data flowed through her enhanced consciousness faster than any computer could process. They're not just retreating, they're showing something that looks like panic behavior. They have never encountered anything like us, Alex replied as he coordinated the movements of human forces that could anticipate enemy tactics before the swarm themselves knew what they were going to do. Every species they have faced before tried to preserve something of their original nature, even while fighting for survival. We are becoming something entirely new. Guide monitored the battle with sensors that tracked every aspect of the conflict in real time. The Kethamori, who had spent millennia preparing for this moment, found themselves watching something they had never dared hope for. Not just human victory, but human evolution into apex predators that made the Void Swarm look like prey animals. Your species is exceeding every projection we made, Guide reported with something that transcended mere excitement. The swarm is not just losing, they are being systematically hunted and destroyed by beings they cannot understand or counter. The space battle reached its climax when Captain Collins led a direct assault on the swarm flagship that commanded the entire invasion fleet. His ship had become something that was part technology and part living creature, with weapons that evolved during combat and defenses that adapted to any attack. Around him, other human vessels had become equally impossible combinations of engineering and biology. All units converge on the primary target, he commanded as his consciousness merged with the ship's targeting systems. End this war now. The flagship was a creature the size of a city that had consumed entire worlds and incorporated their populations into its own structure. Its defenses had protected it against the combined fleets of dozens of advanced civilizations, but it had never faced anything like the transformed humans who attacked it with weapons that changed their fundamental properties during combat. The battle lasted only minutes. Human ships that moved like living predators surrounded the massive vessel and tore it apart with focused fury that turned advanced alien technology into scattered debris. The destruction of the flagship sent shockwaves through the entire swarm fleet as their coordination collapsed and individual ships found themselves fighting alone against an enemy that gave no quarter. Swarm fleet is breaking up, reported voices from across the human fleet that now spoke in harmonies that seemed to come from multiple consciousness working as one. Enemy vessels are attempting to retreat, but we are pursuing and destroying all escapees. On Earth, the collapse of swarm coordination triggered a planet-wide counterattack by human forces that had become the ultimate expression of controlled violence. Ground units that moved with supernatural coordination hunted down every remaining alien presence on the planet. Cities that had been occupied by swarm forces were recaptured in hours by soldiers who fought with capabilities that exceeded anything the invaders could match. No survivors, came the reports from every battlefield on Earth. We are eliminating every trace of swarm presence on the planet. Alex felt a moment of concern about the implications of such complete destruction. Should we be taking prisoners? For study. There are no prisoners with the Void Swarm, Guide replied. They cannot be reasoned with or reformed or contained. They exist only to consume other life forms and convert them into more of themselves. Complete elimination is the only option that ensures your species' survival. The final phase of the battle extended beyond Earth's atmosphere as human ships pursued fleeing swarm vessels across the solar system. What had begun as an invasion of Earth became a hunt that eliminated every alien presence within light years of human space. Ships that had crossed the galaxy to harvest another primitive world found themselves being systematically destroyed by predators they had never imagined could exist. The last swarm vessel has been eliminated, Captain Collins reported from somewhere, beyond the orbit of Mars where his ship had pursued and destroyed the final fleeing enemy. The threat to Earth has been completely neutralized, but the battle had changed more than just Earth's immediate situation. Human forces that had evolved into apex predators during the 18-hour war were not satisfied with merely defending their home world. They had tasted victory against the galaxy's ultimate threat and discovered capabilities that made them the most dangerous species that had ever existed. We need to pursue them to their source, came voices from across the human fleet that now possessed ships and weapons that exceeded anything the galaxy had ever seen. Find where they came from and eliminate the threat permanently. The swarm homeworlds are beyond this galaxy, Guide warned. The distances are vast and the dangers are unknown. Then we will cross those distances and face those dangers, replied the voices that spoke for humanity's new nature. We were created to be weapons. Now we choose to be the weapon that protects all life against the darkness that devours it. Lisa monitored communications from across Earth as the transformed human population began planning for something that no species had ever attempted. Not just defense against the Void Swarm, but an offensive campaign to hunt them across the universe and eliminate them completely. The other hiding survivors, Alex said as he thought about the implications. Guide said there were Kethamori scattered across the galaxy and maybe other species in hiding. If we can find them and share our capabilities, a coalition of survivors led by the ultimate predator species, Guide said with something that sounded like hope. Your people have become what we always dreamed was possible, but never dared believe could be achieved. The story ended, not with Earth's salvation, but with humanity's transformation into something that would hunt across the stars to protect all life against extinction. The tiny house in the Amazon jungle had opened a door that revealed not just a horrifying secret, but the potential for intelligence to evolve beyond its natural limits and become something that could face any threat the universe might offer. Captain Collins stood on the bridge of his hybrid ship as it prepared to leave the solar system and begin the hunt for swarm strongholds in distant galaxies. Around him, crew members who had been human, but were now something more prepared weapons that would carry the war to enemies who thought they were the apex predators of the universe. All ships prepare for departure, he commanded to a fleet that represented the evolution of warfare itself. Time to show the galaxy what happens when someone threatens humanity's home. The sky turned black as 50,000 Void Swarm ships entered Earth's atmosphere. Each vessel was a nightmare of organic technology and destructive capability that had consumed entire star systems. They moved in perfect formation like a living organism responding to a single controlling intelligence. The sound of their passage shook the ground and shattered windows in cities around the world. Captain Collins coordinated the defense from the hidden base in the Amazon as reports flooded in from every battlefield on Earth. The pattern was the same everywhere. Initial human resistance followed by swarm adaptation followed by escalating violence, as both sides committed more resources to the fight. But something was different this time. Human forces weren't breaking under pressure the way previous species had done. Status report from all theaters, he commanded into his radio. European theater reporting, came a voice with a British accent. We've lost London, but Manchester and Birmingham are holding. Enemy forces are taking heavy casualties, but they keep adapting to our tactics. Pacific Theater here, reported an American voice from somewhere in the Pacific Fleet. We've sunk 30 swarm vessels, but they're learning to counter our naval strategies, requesting immediate reinforcement. Asian Theater checking in, said a voice that sounded exhausted. Tokyo has fallen, but we've established defensive lines around Osaka and Kyoto. Enemy ground forces are unlike anything we've ever faced, but our people are fighting like nothing I've ever seen. Alex listened to the reports with a mixture of pride and horror. Human beings were dying by the millions as entire cities fell to the swarm assault. But they were also fighting back with a ferocity and effectiveness that surprised everyone, including themselves. Every battle was a learning experience, and humans were learning faster than any species the swarm had encountered before. The genetic modifications are working beyond our projections, Guide reported as it monitored the global situation. Your species is adapting to swarm tactics in real time. Individual soldiers are developing new fighting techniques during combat. Commanders are inventing strategies that we never taught them. Your people are becoming the ultimate warriors we hoped they could be. Lisa tracked the flow of battle on multiple screens, showing every continent simultaneously. But we're still losing ground. Even with our enhanced capabilities, the swarm has overwhelming numbers. They can afford to lose 10 units for every one of ours and still win through attrition. That is why we must change the nature of the conflict, Guide said, as it activated new displays showing swarm fleet positions in orbit. Traditional defensive warfare will not work against an enemy with such numerical superiority. We must take the fight to them and destroy their ability to reinforce ground forces. Captain Collins studied the orbital displays with growing understanding. You want us to attack their ships in space. We want you to eliminate their command structure, Guide corrected. The Void Swarm operates through a distributed intelligence that coordinates all their forces. Destroy enough of their ships and the entire fleet will become confused and vulnerable. But this requires weapons and tactics that go far beyond conventional warfare. The screens changed to show launch facilities hidden around Earth that were now activating for the first time. Massive structures that had been disguised as mountains or hidden beneath ice caps were opening to reveal spacecraft that combined human engineering with Kethmori technology. Ships that could carry human crews into battle against forces that had conquered the galaxy. You built us a space navy, Alex said with amazement. We built you the tools you would need for total war, Guide replied. Every option and every weapon that might be necessary to defeat an enemy that has never been defeated. Your species was designed not just to fight, but to win, regardless of cost. Captain Collins felt the weight of command settling on his shoulders as he realized what was being asked of them. You want us to commit everything, every weapon, every person, every resource on the planet. The Void Swarm shows no mercy and accepts no surrender, Guide answered. They will not stop until every human being has been converted into one of their units, and every trace of your civilization has been erased. Your only choice is total victory or complete extinction. The radio crackled with new reports as human forces around the world began receiving the advanced weapons and spacecraft that had been hidden for decades. Fighter pilots found themselves flying craft that responded to their thoughts as much as their controls. Infantry units discovered weapons that seemed to know exactly how to hurt their alien enemies. Naval commanders took command of submarines that could dive beneath the ocean floor and emerge in space. This is incredible, came a voice from somewhere over the Pacific. These new fighters are like nothing we've ever flown. I just took out 3 swarm ships without breaking a sweat. Ground forces in Africa reporting successful counterattack, said another voice. The new weapons are cutting through enemy armor like it's made of paper. We're actually pushing them back. Space Command to all units, reported a new voice that was broadcasting from orbit. Human fleet is engaging swarm vessels above the Atlantic. First blood to us, people. These alien ships can be killed. But the swarm was learning too. As human forces pressed their advantage, the alien ships began changing their tactics and adapting their defenses. Weapons that had been devastatingly effective in the first hours of combat became less reliable as the enemy developed countermeasures. The battle was becoming a race between human adaptability and swarm evolution. They're learning from every engagement, Lisa reported with concern. Every time we use a new weapon or tactic, they analyze it and develop counters. At this rate, we'll exhaust our technological advantages within days. Then we must accelerate the conflict before they can fully adapt, Guide said as it activated final defensive systems that had never been tested. It is time to reveal the last secret we have prepared for your species. The displays changed to show humans around the world, who were undergoing transformations that went beyond anything that had happened before. Soldiers whose genetic modifications were activating at levels that changed them into something more than human. Pilots who were merging with their spacecraft to become hybrid creatures of flesh and technology. Scientists who were developing new weapons and strategies faster than should be possible. The final stage of your species development, Guide explained. Under extreme stress, the genetic programming we introduced can push human evolution beyond what any natural species could achieve. Your people are becoming something new, something that has never existed before in this galaxy. Alex watched the transformation with awe and terror. We're not human anymore. You are becoming what humanity was always meant to be, Guide replied. The perfect fusion of intelligence and aggression and adaptability. The ultimate predator designed to hunt and kill the thing that hunts and kills everything else. Captain Collins coordinated the final phase of Earth's defense, as transformed human forces launched a coordinated assault against the swarm fleet in orbit. Ships crewed by beings who were no longer entirely human, but possessed capabilities that exceeded anything the swarm had encountered, weapons that evolved during combat to counter enemy defenses faster than the swarm could adapt. All units, this is final assault, he broadcast to every human force on Earth and in space. Everything we are, everything we have ever been comes down to this moment. Show them what humans do when someone threatens our world. The response that came back was not entirely human voices, but something fiercer and more determined than any species the galaxy had ever produced. The sound of 8 billion apex predators finally awakening to their true nature and preparing to defend their territory against anything that dared challenge them. The first Void Swarm ships descended through Earth's atmosphere like black daggers cutting through the sky. They moved with purpose and coordination that spoke of countless previous invasions. Each ship was the size of a city block and covered in weapons that had never missed their targets. Behind them came smaller craft filled with ground forces ready to begin the harvesting of another world. Captain Collins grabbed a communication device from one of the Kethmori technicians and immediately began coordinating with military forces around the globe. The radio crackled with reports from every continent as commanders tried to make sense of what they were seeing. Aircraft carriers reporting impossible radar contacts. Air Force bases tracking objects that moved faster than any known technology. Infantry units watching ships land in major cities and disgorge creatures that defied description. This is Captain Collins to all units, he broadcast on every frequency he could access. We are under attack by an alien force. This is not a drill. Repeat, this is not a drill. All military personnel report to combat stations immediately. Alex watched the sky through the canopy of trees as more ships appeared overhead. Each one cast shadows that turned day into night and filled the air with a sound like thunder that never stopped. Lisa worked frantically with her equipment trying to coordinate with the Kethmori systems and establish communication links with human forces around the world. The major cities are all under attack simultaneously, Lisa reported as data flowed across her screens. New York, London, Tokyo, Moscow, Sydney. Every major population center on the planet is being hit at the same time. Guide appeared beside them, moving with the fluid grace that marked its species. This is their standard opening strategy. Simultaneous strikes against all centers of resistance and government. They intend to decapitate your command structure before you can organize an effective defense. How long do we have before they start the actual harvesting? Alex asked. The landing forces will spend approximately 6 hours securing key positions and eliminating major threats, Guide replied. Then they will begin processing the civilian population. Every human they capture will be converted into additional swarm units within minutes. Captain Collins listened to the radio reports with growing alarm. Military bases around the world were being overwhelmed by forces they couldn't understand or fight effectively. Aircraft were being shot down by weapons that seemed to predict their movements. Ground forces were reporting casualties from creatures that moved faster than human reflexes could track. "Our conventional weapons aren't working," he said grimly. "Everything we're throwing at them is having minimal impact." "Of course they are not working," Guide replied. "The swarm has encountered every form of conventional warfare that intelligent species typically develop. They have defenses against kinetic weapons and explosives and directed energy systems. This is why we needed to prepare special equipment for your species." The Keth Mori technicians were now handing out weapons that looked like human rifles but clearly incorporated alien technology. The metal was lighter than it should be and warm to the touch. Energy cells that plugged into the weapons glowed with internal light and hummed with barely contained power. "These weapons fire coherent energy that disrupts swarm cellular structure," Guide explained as it demonstrated the controls. "Unlike your conventional weapons, these will cause significant damage to enemy units, but you must remember that the swarm learns quickly. Each weapon will be effective for only a limited time before they adapt their defenses." Lisa picked up one of the alien weapons and was surprised by how natural it felt in her hands. Despite being clearly alien technology, it seemed designed to be operated by human beings. "How long have you been preparing these?" "We have been manufacturing hybrid weapons for 50 years using facilities hidden around your world," Guide answered. "Everything has been designed to integrate with your existing tactical doctrine while providing capabilities that exceed what the swarm expects from a primitive species." Captain Collins tested the weapon and found it responded to his movements with precision that felt almost supernatural. The targeting system seemed to read his intentions and adjust automatically. "This is more than just advanced technology. It's like the weapon knows what I want to do. All of our equipment is designed to interface with the genetic modifications we introduced to your species," Guide explained. "Your enhanced nervous system can control these systems at a level that would be impossible for unmodified humans. You are not just using these weapons, you are bonding with them." More reports came in over the radio as the first wave of swarm forces reached the ground in major cities. Initial resistance was being crushed as human military units tried to fight with conventional tactics against an enemy that had seen everything before. But then something unexpected began to happen. "Wait," Lisa said as she monitored communications from around the world. "Something's changing. I'm getting reports of successful counterattacks in several locations." Captain Collins listened to the radio traffic with renewed hope. Units that had been retreating in panic were suddenly reporting victories against swarm forces. Infantry squads that should have been overwhelmed were holding their positions and inflicting casualties on enemy units that were supposed to be nearly invulnerable. "The genetic modifications are activating," Guide said with something that might have been excitement in its translated voice. "The stress of combat is triggering dormant capabilities in your species. Your people are becoming what they were designed to be." Alex watched the tactical displays with amazement as the pattern of battle began to shift. Human forces that had been losing badly were suddenly fighting with coordination and effectiveness that exceeded their training. Soldiers were making tactical decisions that showed understanding of enemy capabilities they had never encountered before. Pilots were flying aircraft with precision that should have been impossible, given the alien nature of their opponents. "It's happening everywhere," Lisa reported with growing excitement. Military units around the world are reporting similar improvements in combat effectiveness. "It's like our people are suddenly understanding how to fight these things. Your species is awakening to its true nature," Guide explained. "For thousands of years, the genetic programming we introduced has been dormant, waiting for the conditions that would trigger its activation. Combat against an existential threat is causing your people to access capabilities they never knew they possessed." Captain Collins felt it too. A clarity of thought and speed of reaction that he had never experienced before. The alien weapon in his hands felt like an extension of his own body. The tactical situation made perfect sense even though he was facing an enemy completely outside his experience. Every instinct was telling him exactly what needed to be done. "The reports are getting better," Lisa said as she monitored global communications. "Human forces are not just holding their positions, they're starting to push back. Swarm units are being destroyed faster than they can be replaced." "This is unprecedented," Guide said with what could only be described as joy. No species has ever achieved this level of combat effectiveness so quickly after first contact with the swarm. Your people are exceeding every projection we made about their capabilities. But even as human forces began to turn the tide of the first wave, Alex could see more ships arriving in orbit. The initial assault had been just a probing attack to test Earth's defenses. Now that the swarm knew what they were facing, they would send everything they had. "How many more ships are coming?" he asked. Guide checked its equipment and the expression on its alien features grew serious. "All of them," it replied. "The swarm is committing its entire harvesting fleet to this operation. Over 50,000 ships are moving into position for a full-scale assault. Can we handle that many?" Captain Collins asked. "We are about to find out," Guide answered as the sky above them filled with descending ships that blotted out the sun. Guide led them to another room filled with screens that showed views of Earth from space. But these weren't normal satellite images. The cameras were clearly much more advanced and showed details that human technology couldn't detect. Ships moving in the darkness between planets, structures on the moon that had never been there before, and something massive rising from the deepest parts of Earth's oceans. "The Void Swarm has been preparing for 6 months, Guide explained as it manipulated the controls to show different views. They always follow the same pattern. First, they study the target species to understand their capabilities and weaknesses. Then they position their forces for maximum impact. Finally, they begin the harvest." Captain Collins stared at the images with growing alarm. The alien ships were enormous, and there were hundreds of them positioned throughout the solar system. Each one was larger than any human city and bristled with weapons that he couldn't begin to understand. "How many are there?" "This is a small harvesting force by swarm standards," Guide replied. "Perhaps 10,000 ships and a few million individual units. They do not expect significant resistance from your species, so they have not committed their full strength to this operation." "A few million," Lisa repeated in a shocked whisper. "The Void Swarm reproduces by consuming other life forms," Guide explained. "Every creature they devour becomes raw material for creating more swarm units. They estimate your world contains approximately 8 billion potential converts plus all the other life forms that share your planet. This will be a significant addition to their forces." Alex watched the screens with growing dread. "When do they attack?" "Soon," Guide answered. "Their study period is nearly complete and they have finished positioning their forces. We estimate you have perhaps 72 hours before they begin landing ground forces in your major population centers." 72 hours to prepare for a war against an enemy that destroyed thousands of civilizations, Captain Collins said. "That's not nearly enough time." "It will have to be enough," Guide replied. "We have been preparing for this moment for millennia. Hidden bases around your world are already activating. Weapons and equipment are being distributed to key personnel in your military forces. Your governments are being contacted through channels we have established over many years." The screens changed to show locations around Earth where activity was increasing. Underground facilities opening up and revealing technology that looked far beyond anything humans had developed. Aircraft that didn't look like any planes or helicopters in service taking off from hidden runways. Ships emerging from underwater bases and moving toward positions around the planet. "You've been planning this for thousands of years," Lisa said with awe and horror. "We have been planning this since we first arrived on your world," Guide confirmed. "Every aspect of your species' development has been guided toward this moment. Your wars and conflicts have been influenced to ensure you would develop effective military tactics and technologies. Your science and industry have been subtly directed toward discoveries that would be useful in fighting the swarm. You've been manipulating our entire civilization," Alex said angrily. "We have been ensuring your survival," Guide replied calmly. "Left to your own development, your species would never have progressed far enough to pose any threat to the Void. Swarm, you would have been harvested like all the others with barely any resistance. Our guidance has given you a chance that no other species has ever had." Captain Collins studied the tactical displays with a professional eye. "What kind of weapons are we talking about?" Guide touched the controls, and the screens showed images of equipment that looked like a fusion of human and alien technology. weapons that could be carried by individual soldiers, but clearly packed far more power than anything in human arsenals. Vehicles that moved in ways that defied known physics. Defensive systems that could protect entire cities from orbital bombardment. We have spent centuries developing hybrid technologies that combine your industrial capabilities with our scientific knowledge, Guide explained. Weapons that can be manufactured using your existing facilities but enhanced with principles that your scientists have not yet discovered. Defense systems that can be operated by your personnel but powered by energy sources that exceed your current understanding. How do we know any of this will work? Lisa asked. If the swarm destroyed everyone else, what makes you think we can do better? Because we have learned from every previous failure, Guide answered. Each attempt taught us more about swarm tactics and weaknesses. Each defeat showed us what not to try again. You are not just our 7th attempt, you are our most informed attempt. Everything we have learned over thousands of years of warfare has been incorporated into your development. The screens changed again to show battle scenes from previous conflicts. Other species fighting desperately against the darkness that consumed worlds. Some battles showed early victories where modified species pushed back swarm forces and destroyed their ships, but always the pattern was the same. Initial success followed by adaptation and overwhelming counterattack. The other species fought bravely, but they fought like the civilizations they came from. Guide continued. They tried to minimize casualties and preserve their societies and maintain their moral principles even while facing extinction. These are admirable qualities, but they are also weaknesses that the swarm learned to exploit. And you think we'll be different, Captain Collins said. We know you will be different, Guide replied with certainty. Your species has already demonstrated a willingness to commit total war when facing existential threats. You have shown that you can sacrifice everything, including your own moral principles, when survival is at stake. You understand that some enemies cannot be reasoned with and must be completely destroyed. Alex looked at the battle images with new understanding. You want us to fight without restraint. We want you to fight to win, Guide answered. By any means necessary, using any tactics that prove effective regardless of cost. The Void Swarm does not follow your concepts of honor or mercy or proportional response. They exist only to consume and grow stronger. The only way to defeat them is to be more ruthless than they are. And if we lose? Lisa asked quietly. Then this galaxy dies and the swarm moves on to the next one. Guide said simply. They have already consumed everything else. Your world is the last place where intelligent life exists. If you fall, there will be nothing left but empty space and the hunger that devours it. Captain Collins felt the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. How do we begin? The war has already begun, Guide replied as alarms started, sounding throughout the facility. Swarm scout forces are moving into attack position. Your governments are receiving their briefings now. Military commanders around your world are being equipped with the weapons they will need. And you must return to the surface to coordinate the defense of this region. They ran back through the corridors of the impossible house as Guide led them toward the exit. The walls were now covered with tactical displays showing swarm forces moving through space toward Earth, ships dropping out of faster-than-light travel and taking positions around the planet, ground forces preparing to land in major cities across all continents. Remember what you have learned here, Guide said as they reached the doorway. Your species was created for this moment. Everything in your history has prepared you for this war. Trust your instincts and fight without mercy, and you may yet prove that intelligent life can survive against the darkness. They stepped out of the house and back into the Amazon jungle. But the clearing was different now. No longer empty, but filled with equipment and personnel preparing for battle. Humans and Keth Mori working together to set up defensive positions and coordinate with forces around the world. Above them, the sky was changing as ships entered the atmosphere, and the real war finally began. Guide stepped back into the hallway and gestured for them to follow. There is much more you need to understand before the truth becomes complete. Please come inside. You are safe here. Alex looked at Captain Collins, who nodded reluctantly. They stepped through the doorway into the impossible house that was bigger inside than outside. The hallway stretched ahead of them, lined with doors that led to rooms they couldn't see. The blue light from the walls was warm and comforting, but also somehow alien in a way that reminded them they were no longer in a place built by human hands. This building exists in what you might call folded space, Guide explained as they walked down the corridor. We learned long ago how to make small spaces contain large realities. It is one of the few technologies we managed to preserve when we fled our dying worlds. Lisa held her scanner, but the readings had settled into patterns that made no sense, according to human science. How long have you been hiding on Earth? We arrived shortly after your species discovered agriculture, Guide replied. We have been watching and studying you ever since, learning your languages and your customs and your capabilities, trying to determine if you might be the answer we have been searching for. They passed doorways that opened onto rooms filled with equipment that looked like a combination of technology and living tissue. Walls covered with displays showing star maps and data streams and images of creatures from worlds that no longer existed. Everything hummed with quiet energy and purposeful activity. You said you were the last survivors of a coalition, Captain Collins said. How many of you are there? Here on Earth, there are perhaps 50,000 of us scattered across your planet in hidden facilities like this one. Guide answered. We are all that remains of the Kethmori species. Before the swarm came, our population numbered in the billions, across dozens of worlds. They reached a larger room that might have been a laboratory or a command center. The walls were covered with screens showing images of Earth from space and closer views of human cities and activities. Other displays showed data about human biology and psychology and history. It was clear the Kethmori had been studying humanity in incredible detail for a very long time. We have learned much about your species, Guide said as it moved to a central console covered with controls that responded to its touch. But there are things about yourselves that you do not yet know, things we helped to create. Alex felt a chill run down his spine. What do you mean, helped to create? Guide touched the console and the screens around them changed to show images of human DNA. But not normal DNA. This was DNA with sections highlighted in different colors and patterns that clearly showed artificial modification. Insertions and deletions and rearrangements that could not have occurred naturally. Your species was not supposed to exist, Guide said quietly. At least not in the form you have taken. When we first arrived on your world, your ancestors were small groups of primitive hunters living in caves and struggling to survive in a hostile environment. They were intelligent but not unusually so compared to other species we had studied. Lisa stared at the DNA sequences with growing horror and understanding. You experimented on us? We guided your evolution, Guide corrected. Very carefully and very slowly over thousands of generations. We introduced genetic material from other species, traits that we thought might be useful in fighting the void swarm, improvements to your immune system and your nervous system and your capacity for rapid adaptation. The screens showed more images now. Ancient humans, but not quite the humans from history books. These humans were stronger and faster and more aggressive than should have been possible for early human development. They showed better coordination and tactical thinking and an almost supernatural ability to survive in hostile environments. Every major leap in human development was influenced by us, Guide continued. The discovery of fire and agriculture and metallurgy and writing. We provided subtle guidance to push your species toward becoming more than you would have been naturally, more violent and more adaptable and more determined to survive at any cost. Captain Collins looked at the genetic data with a soldier's understanding of what it meant. You turned us into weapons. We turned you into survivors, Guide replied. We took the best traits from dozens of species that had already fallen to the swarm and combined them in ways that had never been tried before. Your capacity for violence comes from the Kraliks, who were warrior philosophers. Your adaptability comes from the Mendi, who could survive on any world. Your stubbornness comes from the Thek, who never surrendered even when their entire civilization was burning around them. Alex felt sick as the implications became clear. Our entire history, all of human civilization, it was all artificial. Not artificial, Guide said with something that might have been sadness in its translated voice. Enhanced. We did not create your capacity for love or art or curiosity or humor. Those traits were already present in your species, and we were careful not to interfere with them. We only amplified the characteristics that would help you survive. Against an enemy that cannot be defeated by wisdom or diplomacy. How many species did you do this to? Lisa asked. You are the 7th attempt, Guide answered. The first 6 species showed promise but ultimately failed when we tested them against Void Swarm scout forces. They were either too peaceful to fight effectively or too violent to work together or too specialized to adapt when their initial strategies failed. The screens changed again to show images of other worlds and other species that looked almost but not quite human. Some were larger and stronger, others were faster and more agile. All of them had clearly been modified in ways similar to what had been done to humanity, and all of them were gone now, consumed by the darkness that spread across the galaxy. What happened to them? Alex asked, though he already knew the answer. They fought bravely, Guide said. Each species lasted longer than the civilizations that had come before them. They developed new strategies and new weapons and new ways of working together that we had not seen before. But in the end, they were still not enough. The swarm learned from each encounter and adapted its tactics. Each victory made it stronger and more difficult to defeat. Captain Collins studied the images of the failed experiments with a professional eye. What makes you think we'll be any different? Because you have already lasted longer than any of the others, Guide replied. The other modified species had perhaps a few hundred years to develop before we were forced to reveal ourselves and begin the war. You have had thousands of years to grow and spread and learn. You have filled your entire world and begun reaching toward other worlds. You have developed technologies and social structures that we did not guide. And because you are still becoming more than we intended, Guide continued, each generation of your species shows improvements that we did not anticipate. You are evolving faster than any species we have observed, and in directions that surprise us. You may already be capable of things that the previous attempts could never achieve. Lisa looked at the genetic data with new understanding. The modifications you made, they're still active, aren't they? Still changing us? Yes, Guide confirmed. The genetic programming we introduced was designed to continue operating across generations, to respond to environmental pressures and gradually optimize your species for survival and combat effectiveness. What you call evolution, we call development, toward your intended purpose. Alex stared at his own hands as if he had never seen them before. We're not really human anymore. We're some kind of hybrid creature designed to fight a war we don't even understand. You are exactly what humanity was meant to become, Guide said firmly. And now it is time for you to embrace that destiny. The Void Swarm has found Earth and they will begin their attack soon. Everything we have worked toward for thousands of years depends on whether your species can succeed where all others have failed. The footsteps came closer down the hallway, but they didn't sound like human feet walking on solid ground. Each step made a soft clicking noise like claws on metal, mixed with something that sounded almost musical. Captain Collins raised his weapon but kept it pointed at the floor. Whatever was coming toward them was taking its time and didn't seem to be trying to hide its approach. Stay calm, everyone, Alex whispered. We might be about to make first contact with an alien species. Or we might be about to become someone's dinner, Captain Collins replied quietly. Lisa held her scanner steady and watched the readings change as something moved through the house toward them. Single entity approaching. Bipedal movement pattern, but the weight distribution is different from human. It's bigger than us, but moving carefully like it doesn't want to seem threatening. The blue lights in the hallway began to pulse in a rhythm that almost matched human heartbeats. The walls themselves seemed to be alive and responding to the presence moving through the building. Symbols appeared and disappeared along the surfaces like words being written and erased by invisible hands. The air grew warmer and filled with a scent that was definitely not from Earth but somehow familiar and comforting. A shadow appeared at the far end of the hallway. Tall and thin but not quite the right shape to be human. It moved with a grace that suggested intelligence and purpose. As it came closer, they could see it was wearing something that might have been clothing or might have been part of its body. The material seemed to shift and change color as it moved. Don't shoot unless it attacks, Alex said firmly. This could be the most important moment in human history. The being stopped about 10 feet away from the doorway where they stood. In the blue light, they could see it clearly for the first time. It was definitely not human, but not completely alien either. Tall and thin, with 4 arms instead of 2. Its head was larger than a human head and shaped differently, but it had recognizable features like eyes and what might have been a mouth. Its skin was a pale green color that seemed to have patterns running through it like veins, but more complex and beautiful. "Greetings," the being said in perfect English that somehow came from the air around them instead of from its mouth. "We have been waiting for you to find us." Alex stepped forward with his hands raised to show he wasn't carrying weapons. "You speak our language." "We speak all languages," the being replied. "Communication is necessary for understanding, and understanding is necessary for survival."
"I am what you might call a researcher. My name cannot be pronounced by your vocal cords, but you may call me Guide." Lisa lowered her scanner slightly. "You've been studying us." "We have been studying everyone," Guide answered as it moved closer
to the doorway. "Your species and many others. We collect information about all forms of intelligent life because knowledge is the only weapon that matters in the coming war." Captain Collins kept his weapon ready but didn't point it at the being. "What war?" Guide's eyes, which were larger than human eyes and a deep golden color, looked directly at each of them in turn. "The war against extinction. The war against the enemy that consumes worlds and leaves nothing behind but emptiness. The war that every species must eventually fight or cease to exist." "You're talking about some kind of galactic threat," Alex said. "I am talking about the end of everything unless someone stops it," Guide replied. "We are called the Kethamori, and we are the last survivors of a coalition that once included thousands of species from across this galaxy. We have been hiding and running and studying for longer than your species has existed." The being gestured with one of its 4 arms, and the walls of the hallway began to show images. Pictures that moved like videos but were somehow projected directly into the air. They showed stars and planets and spaceships traveling between them. Beautiful cities on worlds under alien suns. Beings of many different shapes and sizes working together in harmony. "This was our galaxy once," Guide continued. "Filled with life and intelligence and hope. Millions of species learning from each other and growing together towards something greater than any of us could achieve alone." The images changed to show something else. Darkness spreading across the star map like an infection. Planets going silent one by one. Ships fleeing in all directions carrying refugees from worlds that no longer existed. The beautiful cities burning and crumbling as something terrible consumed everything in its path. "The void swarm came from outside our galaxy," Guide explained. "We still do not know where they originated or what drives them. They consume all forms of life and convert the energy into more of themselves. They cannot be reasoned with or bargained with or stopped by any conventional means. They exist only to devour and grow stronger." Lisa stared at the images with horror and fascination. "How many species have they destroyed?" "All of them," Guide answered simply. "Except for us and now you. We are the only intelligent life left in this galaxy, and the swarm is still hunting us." Captain Collins felt his blood turn cold. "How long do we have?" "They found this solar system 6 of your months ago," Guide replied. "They are currently studying your world and your species to determine the best method of consumption. We estimate you have perhaps 1 of your years before they begin the harvesting." Alex struggled to process what he was being told. "Why are you telling us this? What can we possibly do against something that destroyed thousands of advanced civilizations?" Guide moved closer until it was standing just inside the doorway. This close, they could see that its skin wasn't just green, but had patterns that shifted and changed like living tattoos. Its 4 arms moved independently of each other with a coordination that was beautiful and alien. "Because you are different," Guide said with something that might have been excitement in its translated voice. "In all our years of studying and observing, we have never encountered a species quite like yours. You are young and primitive by galactic standards, but you have something that all the advanced civilizations lacked." "What's that?" Lisa asked. "You are survivors," Guide answered. "Your entire evolutionary history is a record of survival against impossible odds. Your world has tried to kill you with ice ages and volcanic eruptions and meteor impacts and plagues, and yet you not only survived, but grew stronger. You learned to use tools and fire and language not just to live but to dominate your environment completely. The images on the walls changed again to show scenes from human history. Cave paintings and pyramids and wars and explorations, cities rising and falling and rising again, humans spreading across their planet and reaching toward the stars despite having technology that was laughably primitive compared to the civilizations the swarm had already destroyed. The species that fell to the void swarm were peaceful, Guide continued. They had learned to live in harmony with their worlds and each other. They were wise and gentle and committed to preserving life, all admirable qualities but useless against an enemy that exists only to destroy. But we're different because we're violent, Captain Collins said. You are different because you refuse to give up. Guide corrected. Because when faced with extinction, you do not accept it gracefully. You fight with whatever weapons you can find, and when those weapons fail, you make new ones. When your cities fall, you build new cities. When your people die, you make more people. You are the only species we have found that treats survival not as a goal, but as a basic fact of existence. Alex looked at his companions and saw his own thoughts reflected in their faces. You want us to fight the void swarm? We want you to be what you were born to be, Guide answered. We want you to be the weapon that no other species could become. The moment Alex opened the tiny door, a wave of energy burst out from the house like an invisible explosion. Lisa's scanner screamed with alarms as the readings spiked beyond anything it could measure. The air around them shimmered and bent like heat waves rising from hot pavement. Captain Collins felt his hair stand on end and his radio burst into life with voices speaking in dozens of different languages all at once. Alex, get away from that thing, Lisa shouted as she tried to control her equipment. But Alex couldn't move. He stared through the open doorway at the impossible space inside the tiny house. The room beyond the door stretched away into darkness filled with lights that pulsed like heartbeats. Shapes moved in the distance too far away to see clearly but wrong in ways that made his eyes water. Carlos screamed something in his native language and ran back into the jungle. His footsteps crashed through the undergrowth until the sound faded away completely. Captain Collins drew his weapon but didn't know what to point it at. The air itself seemed to be the enemy now, crackling, with electricity that made their skin tingle and their teeth ache. The house is growing, Lisa said in a voice that shook with fear and wonder. Alex blinked and stepped back from the tiny building. Lisa was right. The house was getting bigger. Or maybe they were getting smaller. It was hard to tell which because everything around them seemed to be changing at the same time. The clearing expanded outward as the trees moved further away. The ground beneath their feet stayed solid, but felt different, like they were standing on the deck of a ship in rough seas. That's not possible, Captain Collins said, but his voice sounded uncertain. The tiny house continued to change. What had been the size of a shoebox was now as big as a doghouse. The door that Alex had opened with 2 fingers was now large enough for a child to walk through. The windows grew clearer, and they could see lights moving inside like people carrying lanterns through dark rooms. Lisa's scanner finally stopped screaming and settled into a steady beeping that matched the rhythm of her heartbeat. The energy signature is stabilizing, but it's still beyond anything we can measure. Alex, this thing is rewriting the laws of physics around us. Alex couldn't take his eyes off the growing house. The metal walls were now detailed enough to see that they were covered in tiny symbols that seemed to move and change when he wasn't looking directly at them. The blue roof shifted through different shades like the sky during sunset. The steps leading to the door were now large enough to see the intricate carvings that covered every surface. We need to get out of here, Captain Collins said as he grabbed Alex by the arm. But when he looked around the clearing, he realized they might already be lost. The jungle that had surrounded them was now much further away. The trees looked smaller, and the sky above them had changed color from green-filtered sunlight to a deep purple that reminded him of twilight. Look at your watch, Jake, Lisa said quietly. Captain Collins looked down at his wrist and felt his stomach drop. His watch had stopped, but not at the time when they entered the clearing. According to the display, it was showing a date 3 days in the future. This has to be some kind of electromagnetic interference. All our equipment is showing the same thing, Lisa replied as she checked her scanner and camera. Either we've been here for 3 days without knowing it, or time is moving differently around this house. The house was now the size of a garden shed and still growing. Through the open door they could see a hallway that stretched back further than the building should allow. Soft lights lined the walls and cast dancing shadows that suggested movement in rooms beyond their sight. The air that came from inside smelled like metal and ozone, with an underlying scent that was almost floral but not quite like any flower that grew on Earth. "Someone lives in there," Alex said softly. "That's impossible," Captain Collins replied. "The house was tiny when we found it. Nothing could have been living inside something that small." "Maybe they weren't small when they went inside," Lisa suggested. "Maybe the house makes things the right size somehow." Alex took a step toward the growing building. "We have to go inside. This could be the greatest discovery in human history. This could be the most dangerous thing we've ever encountered," Captain Collins countered. "We don't know what's in there or what it wants." The house had grown to the size of a small cabin now and showed no signs of stopping. The door hung open like an invitation, but also like a trap. The lights inside pulsed more quickly now, and they could hear sounds coming from the depths of the building. Not voices exactly, but something that might have been communication between beings that didn't use words the way humans did. "My equipment is picking up movement patterns inside," Lisa said, as she studied her scanner display. "Multiple entities moving in coordinated patterns. Whatever is in there, it's organized and intelligent. And it knows we're here," Alex added. The door opened for us. This house wanted to be found. Captain Collins checked his weapon and made sure his radio was set to the emergency frequency, even though it only produced static. "If we're going to do this, we do it smart. Lisa, you stay behind us with the scanner. Alex, you're with me, but if I say run, you run. Whatever is in there, we don't know if it's friendly." "The stories Carlos told us," Alex said as they approached the now cabin-sized house. "He said his people have legends about small doorways that lead to big troubles. What if this has happened before?" "Then where are the people who found the other doorways?" Lisa asked. They reached the steps of the house, which were now large enough for humans to climb easily. The carvings in the stone were incredibly detailed and showed scenes that might have been historical or might have been decorative. Strange creatures with too many arms worked alongside beings that looked almost human but not quite. Ships sailed through star-filled skies while massive structures rose from planets that had multiple suns. "These carvings," Alex whispered as he studied them. "They're telling a story." The sounds from inside the house grew louder as they climbed the steps. Not threatening sounds, but complex patterns that suggested conversation or maybe music. The air coming from the open door was warmer now and carried scents that reminded them of places they had never been. Metallic and organic at the same time, like a garden growing in a spaceship. Captain Collins reached the doorway first and peered inside. The hallway was lit by panels in the walls that gave off a soft blue light. The corridor stretched back much further than should be possible and branched off into other passages that led to rooms they couldn't see. Everything looked designed for beings about the same size as humans, which was either a coincidence or meant something important. "Hello," Alex called out in a voice that echoed down the impossible hallway. The sounds from inside stopped completely. Then, after a moment that felt like hours, they heard something that might have been footsteps approaching from somewhere deep in the house. Dr. Alex Martinez wiped the sweat from his forehead as he pushed through the thick green leaves of the Amazon jungle. The humidity made his clothes stick to his skin, and his boots sank into the muddy ground with each step. Behind him walked Dr. Lisa Thompson carrying her scanning equipment and Captain Jake Collins, who kept looking around with sharp eyes for any danger. Their guide Carlos Mendez moved ahead of them like he knew every tree and rock in this place. They had been walking for 3 days now, following the strange readings that Lisa's satellite had picked up 2 weeks ago. The energy signature didn't match anything they knew about, and it came from deep in the jungle where no humans were supposed to live. Alex had convinced the university to fund this expedition because the readings were too unusual to ignore. "How much further, Carlos?" Alex called out as he stumbled over a fallen log. "Not far now," Dr. Carlos replied without turning around. "But I tell you again, this is not a good place. My people have stories about this area, old stories that say bad things happen here. Lisa adjusted her scanner and looked at the display. The readings are getting stronger. Whatever is out there, it's definitely not natural. Captain Collins checked his radio again, but got only static. They had lost contact with base camp yesterday, and the thick jungle blocked most signals. He didn't like being cut off, but Alex had insisted they continue. The scientist was determined to find the source of the energy readings, even if it meant going deeper into unexplored territory. The jungle around them was different here. The trees seemed older, and the animal sounds were strange. Even the air felt heavy in a way that had nothing to do with humidity. Carlos kept muttering prayers under his breath in his native language and making signs with his hands that Alex didn't recognize. There. Carlos stopped suddenly and pointed ahead through the trees. That is where your machine says to go. But, Doctor, I will not go closer. This place is cursed. Alex looked where Carlos was pointing and saw a small clearing ahead. The trees formed an almost perfect circle around an open space, and the ground looked different. Not muddy like everywhere else, but hard and smooth like stone. In the center of the clearing sat something that made Alex's breath catch in his throat. It was a house, but not a normal house. This house was tiny, no bigger than something a child might play with. It sat perfectly in the middle of the clearing, like someone had placed it there with great care. The walls looked like they were made of some kind of metal that shined even in the dim jungle light. The roof was a strange blue color that seemed to change as Alex looked at it. My God, Lisa whispered as she raised her scanner. Alex, look at these readings. The energy is coming from that thing. Alex walked slowly into the clearing with the others following behind him. The tiny house was perfect in every detail. It had little windows with what looked like glass, a small door that even had a tiny handle, steps leading up to the entrance that were carved with patterns he had never seen before. The whole thing was about the size of a shoebox but felt important, in a way that made no sense. This can't be real, Alex said as he knelt down next to the house. Who would build something like this out here? And why? Captain Collins kept his hand near his weapon as he looked around the clearing. The trees seemed to lean inward like they were watching. No birds sang here and no insects buzzed. The silence was complete except for their breathing and the quiet beeping of Lisa's equipment. The energy readings are off the charts, Lisa said with excitement in her voice. This thing is putting out more power than our base camp generator. But I can't figure out what kind of energy it is. It doesn't match anything in our databases. Alex pulled out his tools and started taking pictures of the house from every angle. The craftsmanship was incredible. Every tiny detail was perfect. The metal looked new, like it had been made yesterday, but somehow felt ancient at the same time. The patterns carved into the steps and around the windows were complex and beautiful, but completely unknown. Carlos, what do your stories say about this place? Alex asked without looking away from the house. Carlos stayed at the edge of the clearing and would not come closer. The old ones say there are doorways here. Small doorways that lead to big troubles. They say when the small doors open, the world changes, people go missing. Strange things happen. My grandfather told me never to come here, but you pay good money, Doctor. Doorways to where? Lisa asked as she tried to get better readings with her scanner. To the places where the star people live, Carlos said quietly. To the places where the hungry dark waits. Captain Collins didn't believe in local superstitions, but something about this place made him nervous. The air felt charged like before a storm, and his skin tingled with electricity. His radio crackled with static that almost sounded like voices speaking in languages he didn't know. Alex reached out slowly toward the tiny house. His hand shook slightly as he got closer to the small door. The metal felt warm under his fingers and seemed to vibrate with some kind of inner life. The door handle was so small he could barely grip it with 2 fingers. Alex, maybe we should study it more before touching anything, Lisa said with worry in her voice. Just a quick look, Alex replied. We came all this way. The door handle turned easily in his fingers like it had been waiting for someone to open it. There was a soft click and the door swung open on tiny hinges that moved without any sound. Light spilled out from inside the house. Not electric light or firelight, but something else. Something that hurt to look at directly. Alex leaned down to peer through the doorway and gasped The inside of the house was not small. It stretched away further than should be possible and was filled with things that didn't make sense. Machines that glowed with their own light. Walls covered in symbols that seemed to move when he wasn't looking directly at them. "This is impossible," he whispered. That was when everything changed.